Welcome, everyone. Thank you for your patience. My name is Jared Michaelek. I'm VP of Innovation AI Apps at Salient Process. I'm joined by Bob Spory, Principal Worldwide Sales for CloudPak for Business Automation. And we should be joined also by Swapnil Agarwal, who is the Senior Product Manager for IBM Automation Data and AI, who focuses on the Blueworks 5 platform from IBM. Today, we have a very exciting segment, part 2 of our series, talking about process excellence and process improvement and documentation. Today, we're going to talk about how we can infuse AI into those kinds of initiatives. We're very excited to announce and unveil a new offering from Salient Process called Innovation Studio. We'll talk a little bit more about that. That is going to be something we launch leading up to the IBM Think conference, which is happening a week from today. And if you would like to sign up for early access, we should be able to grant you access this week coming out of this session. So stay tuned for instructions on how to request early access. But with that, let's go ahead and get started. So this is our agenda. We're going to talk through why we are thinking about things in this way and being able to look at the problem statement of why would we want to include AI into these kinds of initiatives and talk about some of the gaps and challenges that organizations are having. We'll do a brief overview of IBM Blueworks Live. If you're not familiar with it, it's one of my favorite IBM technologies, very easy, intuitive tool to use. We have hundreds of clients that we work with around this initiative, and it's really a great way to kind of take on your visibility and your understanding and your potential improvement in all parts of the organization. We'll then dive into Watsonx AI and do a brief overview on some of the differentiators, some of the exciting things that IBM is doing in this space. And then we'll really go through Innovation Studio, both as a presentation and a background on what the tool does. And then we'll get into a live demo. That'll be the bulk of the session today. And then we'll open it up for questions. So if you do have questions, there is a Q&A button at the top of your Teams meeting. And then there's also chat. So we'll be monitoring both. If you kind of maybe focus on the Q&A section, we'll cover those at the end. And then we'll cover any questions posted in the comments as well. But we'll definitely leave some time at the end for any questions or comments you guys have. All right, so let's talk about the challenges of process improvement and why organizations often have trouble in this space. And we've been doing this for a long time. I'm trained as an industrial engineer. I've been doing process improvement for 25 plus years. And the challenges are still out there, right? We still see a lot of organizations struggling to meet the demands and the needs of their stakeholders and business users. And why is that? A big part of that is not knowing where to start. So looking at process improvement, that's daunting. You can really take on any part of the business. So where should you focus on? Where is the low-hanging fruit? How do you know what you can kind of get some quick wins? So that's a big challenge. It also can take a long time, right? We see some of these initiatives starting and then taking months or even years to get to a good critical mass of business process documentation. And that's not even counting actual process improvement and automation. So just looking at that is kind of scary to embark on that journey and know that it's going to be a multi-year journey. And it probably will never end, right? That's the other piece, is it really never ends and you're never really done because you have this idea of continuous improvement. We also see that documentation is coming in all shapes and sizes and spread throughout the organization. So it's sitting in things like policy documents or compliance documents or in standard operating procedures, SOPs, in company manuals, right? All parts it's in PDFs and Word documents and PowerPoints and Excel spreadsheets and even images. So how do we collect that? How do we use that information and not start from scratch and not start from the ground up? The other challenge that we see is it's not usually anyone's full-time job to address process improvement. Now, of course, there are process improvement divisions within large organizations, but really looking at the actual documentation and the actual identification of potential opportunities, we're not seeing a lot of roles that are focused exclusively on that area, and so that's going to be a big challenge. And then looking to identify and quantify potential improvements, automations, opportunities, having that ability to dig into that process and truly understand not only how it works today, but how could it work better in the future. So those are some of the things that we see in the field. I'm sure there's a ton of other challenges that that you see on your day-to-day, and I'm very interested to hear some of those. But these are some of the high-level ones that we really want to dig into and understand how can we make that better. On the flip side, we also see challenges in artificial intelligence, right? This is a new area for every company and every organization, and so we're starting to just get started at the beginning here of what are some of the things that we are facing when we try to think about a strategy around AI. And similar to process improvement, we don't know where to start, right? The world is our oyster, and there's a ton of potential things that we could do. So where is the low-hanging fruit? Where can I find some areas where I can really tackle, get some wins, and then iterate on top of that and start to grow that out? Where's their expertise? There's no single company that's been doing this 25 years, right? This is brand new technology. ChatGPT just came out a year and a half ago. It's brand new stuff. And so looking at how we can take these technologies, apply them, and we're seeing this change very, very quickly. And so who are the experts? How do I know who I can trust and bring in and help me understand how to apply this technology? And can we trust the results, right? This is a big one. And this is something that a lot of organizations are seeing where they've taken in something like OpenAI or other kinds of public models and realized that there are things like hallucinations or biases that are going to take them down the wrong path. And sometimes it's so close to looking like it should be true, you don't know if it's true or not. And so how can you trust those results? And is it secure, right? As I'm using, I'm asking it for a recipe for French onion soup, I don't really care if they use that to continue to train the model. If I'm putting financial information or company proprietary information into those questions, into those prompts, that's a big deal, right? I need to know that that information is not being shared with other organizations, that it's not being fed into the larger model. So how do I know that it's secure? And is it expensive, right? This is another unknown that I talk to a lot of organizations about. How much is it? What do we need to invest in this to get started? And so we have some really good answers on all of these. And then the big one is, do I need to pick one provider or one LLM, right? What are some of the best practices around that? And so understanding all of these challenges, kind of combining those into one view, is why we are looking at launching this new innovation studio, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But with that, I'm now going to turn it over to, is Swapnil on now, or are we going to go to Bob?
I'm here.
Okay,
Sure.
perfect. So Swapnil, I'll drive. You tell me when to go to the next slide here.
Yep, we're good for the next slide. So I just want to introduce IBM Blueworks Live, what the problem statement there is, some of the recent improvements we've made, and hand it back to Jared from there. To start off with, I want to talk about digital transformation. So a lot of numbers here. I won't get into each of these, but we've been seeing for a few years now that a lot of companies looking to start their digital transformation still. As we work in the field, we see that a lot of companies are still documenting their processes in Google Drive, in PowerPoint presentations, even in Visio. The problem with a lot of those tools is they're not meant for digital processes. And digital processes, or building out and mapping and documenting your processes, is the first step that you need to do in order to even start with some automation work, in order to understand risk and compliances. So as we see here with some of the numbers, this is a big market. Almost more than 80% of the companies will see a great ROI if they start with their digital transformation. And this is just what the truth of the market is. So Jared, if we go to the next slide. Now, what are the key hurdles in this process? So if you want to start your digital process automation, even start documenting this, what's the 4 problems you'll see? The first one is inadequate tools. Like I mentioned, if you're using PowerPoint, if you're using things like Visio, they're great tools for specific things, but for process optimization, to map out and document your processes, there aren't enough good tools out there. The reason is there's no collaboration and change resistance in them. So if you want to work with the team, you never work on processes in a silo. They're part of a bigger organization. There's multiple stakeholders involved. There's different versions that you have to create. The processes evolve over time. And that requires standardization. So across your entire company, you'll have a center of excellence. You need to have standardization across your multiple processes. The tools that are out there that let you create these processes in silos don't allow for this standardization. There's no spec to the processes. There's no common glossary. And you can't integrate with other tools as well. So if you have a risk compliance tool that you use, like Open Pages as an example, you can't synchronize that with your processes. If there's complexity in there where you have one process that links to another, that's not necessarily something easy to do in tools outside. And that's where we bring in Blueworks Live. So share the next slide. Now, Blueworks Live is meant for process discovery. So as you see on the top right here, it engages business users. This is not a technical tool. This is a no-code tool. You can have your analysts, your data scientists, everyone in your line of business come in, work together and collaborate to create a process. It's drag and drop. It's kind of like replacing your sticky notes is what we call it. So as you see in the screenshot here, you come in, add all of the different activities. We automatically convert that into a process in the background. It's got a lot of rich metadata behind it. So we're talking about standardizing the processes and terms. So you can come in, define what the company-wide glossary for your organization looks like, and all of your processes can kind of connect to that and have the same language. This is also collaborative. So just like Google Docs or other tools that we use to like box notes, you can have multiple people working on the same process at the exact same time. There's built-in chat, you can add comments. So with the standardized terms, you have your collaboration, and this allows you to have Blueworks Live as a single source of truth. So all of the information about your process can be standardized and linked within this tool. As I mentioned, we also have been working on some of the APIs to synchronize with other tools that you may use. So this way, all of the content you have across the organization stays consistent, synchronized with everything else. You update something in one place, it comes in and it gets updated in Blueworks Live as well. And the other way around works as well. This is the cloud-based solution, so there's no downloads required. We provision the tool and it's available for you to use and your users to use in the web browser in a very easy to use way. Now, going back to the single source of truth, I mentioned that there's a few APIs. Now, historically, Blueworks Live had a lot of incoming APIs where you would see all of the data inside Blueworks Live. You'll be able to read that data, but there was no way for us to put data into Blueworks Live. With AI coming in and us having to enable generative AI with making discovery easier, having to make this screen that you see with the sticky notes, we introduced a lot of outgoing APIs as well, where you can take your applications and have data put into Blueworks Live. So Jared, if you go to the next slide, I just want to talk about some of the APIs we introduced in the last quarter, a month or so ago. Now, this is just some of the highlights. We have a lot more APIs that we can use, but these are the key ones that enable our partners like Salient to create a lot of tools that you'll see in the demo today, where you can go in, synchronize data across different organizations. You can take AI models from things like Watsonx AI, bring that into Blueworks Live, add document. For things like risks, you can create policies. So the first one we have is the import process model, where we can take a BPM and 2.0 process. As I mentioned before, Blueworks Live enables you to standardize processes across organization. The way we do this is not just our glossary, but we also follow the BPM and 2.0 spec. This is an industry-wide spec for processes. And we enable the import for that so that you can import process models. You can have a standard language that's created, even though you are using AI. The second one is to synchronize the metadata. So each of these processes contain multiple activities. The activities contain details like what the cycle time would be, what the cost would be, who the participants are, experts, things like that, everything that you need to understand what that activity looks like. So you can not only read data out of Blueworks Live, but put data into Blueworks Live now as well. So that's what this API allows you to do. The same thing with the documentation and the policies as well. So you can add all of the descriptions of the different activities that you have. So if you have activities that are defined in a Word file somewhere, you can take that information, you can put that back into Blueworks Live. If you use Gen AI to create prompts around what an activity detail is, you can add that as documentation into your Blueworks Live model as well. And finally, creating policies. This is probably one of the most important ones where each of your activities has different policies. There's risks around there, there's compliance. rules around there. And before, you couldn't synchronize those with your external tools with something like Open Pages. So for people who are managing policies and need to do an impact analysis of what changes would be affected if a policy changes, this is something that can come in quite handy. This contains external references as well. So if you have policies that link out to other tools, you can add those into Blueworks Live in here as well. So these are some of the key API integrations we've added into our latest release. And Jared will talk about how they use those and exploit these to use with generative AI.
Excellent. Thank you,
Jared.
Swapnil. Yeah. And I should add that this timing is impeccable, because some of the things we're seeing now would not be possible without these enhancements to the API. And so I will say, as a takeaway, if you are not familiar with Blueworks, I highly encourage you to take a 30-day trial, take a look, work with Salient, work with IBM. You won't be sorry. I've never met a client that was sorry for moving off of Visio onto Blueworks. And also looking at where you can extend it. So if you're an existing Blueworks Live user, I'm hopeful that you're going to see some very, very exciting things over the next few minutes about how we're using Gen AI to really make that Blueworks Live experience more seamless and more intuitive. In order to do that, we need to leverage a large language model, an LLM, right? And this is where Watsonx AI comes in. So if you're not familiar with Watsonx, I'm going to just give a few slides here, talk about some of the benefits, some of the differentiators that IBM has, and then we'll jump into the demo. So Watsonx AI is kind of founded in these 4 core principles from IBM, where they are really focused on being open, targeted, trusted, and empowering. And what this means is letting the foundation models drive a lot of the different things within, based on the different use cases that you're looking to achieve. That not all language models are built equal, right? They are built for sometimes purposeful or very specific tasks or silos, whereas others are more generalized. And so being able to take advantage of really any large language model is a key piece of the Watsonx AI foundation. We're also targeted. So being able to not use massive models necessarily, we can find very much more targeted, industry-specific or use case-specific models. It's trusted. This is a big one, right? Do I need to be worried about my data? And do I need to be worried about biases or hallucinations? And so IBM is very, very focused there. And then empowering, meaning we can grow as the use cases grow, and you don't have to invest a large amount to get started here. And so it really helps you tune, train, and really make things more specific. And we'll talk about some of that in a few minutes. And a few key pieces of Watsonx is that we can choose the model that we want to work with. We can try different models, and then we can start to tune those, and they become basically our own intellectual property, our own models that we can leverage for these different use cases. This is very exciting, and this is kind of the future of where we see a lot of the AI initiatives going. We can scale. So as you start to build up, you start to scale out with different kinds of data, doing things like RAG, and also looking to use things like assistants to guide you and to very quickly integrate with existing environments. And then, of course, AI with trust, right? That's the common theme here. If you take nothing else away from what IBM is doing around AI, it's really around this trust and governance. It's not that IBM, at least right now, thinks it's going to have the best large language model out there. It has some very good models, but it also includes other open source models. And so just being able to have all of those in a more trusted, more governed way is really the big deal around Watsonx. And so within Watsonx AI, you can tune those models. You can use Prompt Lab, which allows you to try different things and get very quick code samples and plug those into your existing applications. You can use Tuning Studio to really provide a set of data that gives a much more specific type of answer, so that if you are needing to put very large prompts into the Prompt Lab to get the results that you're looking for, you could use Tuning Studio to tune the models, and so then you don't need as big a prompt. And a lot of the pricing is based on the number of characters, the number of tokens that you're including in those prompts. And so you can probably save some money if you have large-scale projects by tuning those models to your specific needs. And then using things like data science and machine learning allows you to really get those modeling and synthetic data generation established. And so there's a lot of bells and whistles that Watsonx AI includes. So I highly encourage you to take a look at that. You can sign up for a free trial there as well. And just to give you an idea of some of the models that are available today, Granite is the IBM model. There's also Llama from Meta or Facebook. There's the Flan model from Google. And so there's a number of different things. We've tried a number of these models for our specific needs. We are using 8 models, 6 of which are coming from Watsonx AI and 2 from other open source models. We'll talk about that when we get into the demo, but this is going to grow. This has grown. Llama 3 was added just a couple weeks ago. The partnership and integration to Hugging Face is going to open the door to other possibilities as well. And so this is just the beginning. Stay tuned for as we see more and more models get included in the Watsonx AI portfolio. Okay, a couple more slides and then we'll get into the live demo here. I want to first introduce what Innovation Studio is. This is a new offering from Salient Process. If you're familiar with Salient, you know that we have a lot of innovation, a lot of accelerators that we provide typically on top of the IBM business automation stack. This is no exception. This is going to be a free early access platform that allows you to incorporate Watsonx AI technologies as well as other AI platforms, as well as other Watsonx technologies that we'll talk about. So a lot of integration with things like Blueworks Live, with Watsonx Orchestrate, Watsonx Assistant, and we'll get into that in a moment. So Innovation Studio is a platform that allows us to do things like identify potential opportunities, look for recommended processes, look for risks and controls within a process. And so a number of different use cases are starting to emerge. Right now, we have 7 key use cases we're going to focus on. Right, the first is business process recommendations. So looking at a given set of information, whether that's industry, department, geography, type of process, all of these things are going to contribute to a very tuned, customized prompt that gives us a top 10 list of the potential processes that would be relevant in that situation. So you can give it very specific information and inputs, and it will come back with very believable, understandable, and relevant processes that you can then import directly into Blueworks Live. Second is intelligent process generation. So not only generating the process from those recommendations, but also building the process from things like documents, right? I mentioned SOPs, manuals, policies. We can build it from images using image recognition. We can upload a screenshot of a Visio diagram or a lucid chart flow. We can even take a picture of a whiteboard or of sticky notes, right? And it will understand that process, summarize that process, and convert that process into a BPMN compliant business process that we can then import directly into Blueworks using that API. Automated process enhancement. This is where we can look at using just generative AI, provide recommendations on what would make this process better. Where are the areas that we think we can address within this process, and give me also the technology that might apply, whether it's workflow, decision management, document processing, all of these things, and it can be arbitrary. You can put in your own technologies that you would want to apply to a process. It will give you not only the recommendations, but also the quantified value of what that investment might look like along with the return. Now, take that with a grain of salt, right? That is all based on the information that you're providing it. So if you're not giving it much information, then you're not going to get very accurate information back. But what we're finding is if we can provide it with more intuitive, more specific information about the organization, the size, the revenue, the number of employees, then it is actually giving us very believable numbers that match what we have seen in the field over the last 25 years. We can also use it to identify risk. If you were part of our previous, or the first part of this series where we talked about using Blueworks and process mining with IBM Open Pages, that GRC strategy is still relevant here when you start thinking about it in terms of AI, right? What if I could look at a process and provide recommended risks within that process, along with recommended controls of how to mitigate those risks, and then take that information and put that directly into either Open Pages or Blueworks Live. That's a very, very powerful story. I think that really complements what we talked about in that previous webinar 2 weeks ago, and looking at where we can make that even better with additional metadata that we can start applying to that, such as the impact, the likelihood, and other pieces of information within those risks. Visual storytelling, we're seeing, is a really exciting area, because what we can do with this is start using that process to create a story, to create a summary, and both within text, right? So we can create a story that describes the essence of that process, but it can also create images based on that story. And so we can really get visual representations of the business process in any style that we want. So you can make it fun and creative and make it Disney or Star Wars or something like that, but we could also make it more business focused, where we say, I want this to be summarized for my risk and compliance team, or I want this to be summarized for my CFO, right? And so you can build different stories around that, and then the images could also be customized to create an infographic, or to create a comic book, or to create IKEA instructions, right? All of those things are possible just creating that single process. Another exciting thing, and this is for my IBM seller friends out there, using this to drive prospecting outbound, and not just to sell, but to make these opportunities that we're discovering more relevant and understandable to our potential clients, right? So you found that RPA and workflow might be applied to your HR onboarding process. Help me describe that, and help me describe the benefits of why that's important and why they should care about that. So as we go through the discovery, we're uncovering those opportunities along with the stakeholders that might invest in those opportunities. Now we can use prospecting email generation to automatically build, take that all together and put that into a single email. And lastly, the technology area recommendations. What we're doing here is letting this help me focus on where the different key technology pieces, so based on the different areas of the business and combining that with the different goals or other kind of background and relevant information about that business, how can I make that more understandable, right? And use the technology that I have and marry that with these business processes that I've brought in, either generated or from Blueworks Live. Okay, and then lastly, what is this all based on? So this is a platform that sits between a number of different technologies, and we're starting to grow this as well, and you'll see more enhancements over the next few months. But for now, of course, this is based on the large language models within Watsonx AI. So we're using that for most of the text summarization and generation. We also have integrated Watsonx Assistant to help with that generation, and we'll see better and better results coming from this. We've actually integrated it with the APIs within Innovation Studio, so that we can use a more conversational and guided approach to doing some of this. So if you're not sure where to start, you can use Watsonx Assistant to do that. And of course, Blueworks Live, right? We can either generate process directly in the tool and then import that into Blueworks Live, or we can take existing processes from Blueworks, bring those in, and run those analysis or recommendations or risk control generations. So all of that is fully integrated. And then coming soon, we are going to integrate Watsonx Orchestrate. And this is very exciting, because when you start thinking about some of the tasks that are going to come out of this, so just as an example, I'm using it to come up with opportunities for another organization. I'm going to talk to them about how they could leverage decision management and document processing. And now I can use Orchestrate to maybe set up some of those automated tasks or skills that I would need to do, like follow up emails, add my information to a CRM system, add a reminder to follow up with that individual. And so all these different repeatable skills are going to be exciting. And then the flip side, where I can actually use Orchestrate as my conversational approach to getting some of this information, rather than have to go through the UI of Innovation Studio. So just an alternative way that we could start to use that. And lastly, we do have other AIs embedded in this. So we do use additional LLMs and some other functionality where we don't see the results as good right now from IBM, but those are getting better. So things like image recognition, image generation. So we're using things like DALL-E, Stable Diffusion, etc. So we do have some other plugins, but mainly this all revolves around Watsonx AI. And with that, let's jump into the demonstration. So I'm going to take you through a live demo, and this is the early access version. I was going to do a Blueworks live demo first. I'm going to skip that for now, just in the interest of time. If you are not familiar with Blueworks, please reach out. I'm happy to give you a 10, 15-minute demonstration, show you why you should be using Blueworks. But the idea is that once you start using Blueworks, you can start to use Innovation Studio in conjunction. Now, you don't need Blueworks Live to use Innovation Studio, but it does make it a lot better. A little plug on the call to action, so not jumping ahead too much, but go to innovationstudio.ai, go to register for early access, and you're in. We'll be releasing login instructions later this week. It will be launched before the IBM Think conference next week. So by the end of this week, you'll be using Innovation Studio if you sign up for early access. So go ahead and do that at any point. And now I'm going to go ahead and log in. Now, we talked about those 7 use cases that we saw that we're really focused on right now. Those are, of course, going to grow over time. But let's kind of take you through some of those and just give you an idea of some of the things you can do with Innovation Studio. So the first is the generation side, right? I'm going to generate recommendations. So I am talking to, and I'll just make up something, right? I'm talking to a healthcare organization. I'm talking to their operations department, and this is something that is fully free text, right? I can choose. It gave me the top 10 list, but I can choose anything. I could choose dentist, or I could choose healthcare provider, or whatever more specific information you want to do. For now, I'm just going to use healthcare, focus on the operations department. And then you can choose other things like the role. You can even kind of give it some guidance that you're looking for a specific process type. And so this is the first way that we can start to not only generate ideas or recommendations, we can actually generate the process itself. If I click generate instead of recommend, it would give me the actual process. So here are the top 10 processes for a healthcare organization in operations. And I can see very clearly it is pretty relevant, right? Patient administration, lab testing, inventory management, patient billing. These are just the ones that it came up with. It's generative, right? It's non-deterministic. So if I click recommend again, it would give me potentially a different list. It also tells me who the impacted roles would be, so who's involved in that process, and then of course who the stakeholders are. It's also giving me a relative impact. So again, it's high level, like don't base your entire business strategy on this, but it's really helpful to just get a good view of what's going on here. And then one of the things I like about this, it will give me recommended icons for each of those processes. So you'll see that throughout. So whether you're generating a new business profile, whether you're generating a potential opportunity or even an email, it'll assign an icon to that just to make it a little more visual, understanding of what each of those processes are going to do. So let's pick one. I'm going to use, we'll look at maybe, I'll do patient billing, right? So I'm going to click on patient billing, and what this is going to do is now say, okay, you want a patient billing process, I'm going to go generate that. And so here we can see it's going to not only come back with a list of steps and a list of participants, it's also going to generate the actual BPMN that can then be imported directly into Blueworks. And it's going to be different every time, right? So if I look at the list of steps, here are all the different steps that happened. I didn't get any gateways in this case. If I reran it, I might get a gateway. But then here's the process diagram, right? So again, it's not perfect, and it's not going to be 100% every single time, but it does give you a good starting point on what is this process all about, and can I start to iterate on this? So one of the plans we have in the near future for an upcoming release would be iterating on this process. So once I get something close that I think is pretty reasonable, maybe I can start iterating like, oh, actually collapse these into one swim lane, or add a gateway between these two steps, or also add this role. And then it would just use the information that it already has and just kind of build on that. So it's contextual, right? It remembers what you've already discussed. Some other things that we can do here is I can upload a file, right? I'm not going to do this right now because it does take, about 20 to 30 seconds to process a file. But things like, a Visio diagram that looks something like this. Right? It would understand that process. So while Blueworks does include the ability to import Visio, it's often a time-consuming process. And so if I could do this in a much faster way, just using screenshots, then that would be very beneficial. And it doesn't need to be left to right. It could be something like a top-down process like this. This is actually a Lucid chart diagram. Lucid chart is not BPMN compliant. And so how do we include or migrate from Lucid into Blueworks Live? This would be a great way to do that. Looking at things like whiteboard, right? So being able to take this and understand what that process is doing. And in fact, I've done this I've used this image about a dozen times trying to import, and every single time it picks up that the vice president is here, and it gets those right into the swim lane. So it's super interesting how accurate it is. And then of course, I think it's only going to get better over time. So some of that image recognition is really powerful. And then even things like this, where it's hard for a human to understand, but the system will actually get that pretty close and understand that each of these are the steps and that it's a food ordering process, right? So again, super, super exciting. One of the other things I should mention is we're also able to capture audio. So whether that's audio transcripts or even audio files, MP3s, WAV files. So think about sitting down with a stakeholder and saying, describe the process to me, right? Or taking a Teams recording and feeding that in. And so I can show this to you really quick just to see how powerful this is. I'm going to go ahead and record myself. So the process starts with me submitting a request. My manager reviews that, and if it's approved, it goes to accounting for payment, and if it's rejected, it goes back to the first step. So with just that, it's going to use that audio to generate a process that is then importable to Blueworks Live. So again, I think we're just scratching the surface on this. I think we're really just seeing the early stages, but it is super exciting, right? And just looking at what that process looks like, there's my submit request, review request, is it approved? We're still working on the BPM auto layout, but that's pretty amazing, right? That I just described that process within a few seconds, and it was able to turn that into a BPMN process. And again, if I do that again, it will come up with a different format. So I can regenerate. I can always re-roll the dice. That's the other thing that we see here is if I don't quite get what I want, I can just re-roll, and it's going to give me something else. And right here, I can add that directly to Blueworks, or I can just download the BPMN. So super exciting there. So that's one side of things. The other side is coming the other direction, right? I already have a process, or either I've generated a process or I imported a process from Blueworks Live. And so I can bring in that process here. So for example, I'm just going to use, there's my payment approval process that I just created, right? We'll just use this to start discovering areas that we need to focus on. So notice here we have a list of different capabilities, mainly within the IBM data and AI portfolio, but we can add our own too. If I wanted to add something like data warehouse or integration, I could do that here too, but I'm just going to use the default, and I'm going to come up based on the process, based on the summary. I want to know what are some potential opportunities within this process? Where are some areas of focus? And then tie that into what are some of the technologies or capabilities that might apply. So in this case, I came up with 5, sometimes 10, sometimes 15. But what this is doing is not only telling me about the process. If I hover over it, it says, implement AI decision support to make that informed payment approval decisions better. Yes, that is exactly what I think AI and workflow could do, right? And there it is, AI and decision management could do, right? But we also have analytics, RPA, document processing, and there's workflow, right? So if I hover over workflow, it's going to talk about reducing manual handoffs, improving efficiency. Totally, right? Cost savings. I'm not as worried about that right now. I didn't use the company profile, so I don't have revenue, number of employees, or other things. But it gives me a relative understanding of where some of the bigger benefits, some of the bigger bets might be. And I can do this for risks, right? So risk mitigation, being able to take that process, that description, and come up with where in this process are there potential risks and what would be controls I could apply to those risks that might mitigate that, right? This is great for just sanity checking, right? You're not going to use this to drive your entire GRC strategy, but it can help. It could, definitely complement what you're doing today and start to find things that maybe you didn't think about, like, oh yeah, we didn't think about that, right? So looking at, unauthorized payments, request rejection, loss of data, delay in request review, looking at not only the impacted steps, but also the potential controls, right? Authorization limits, two-factor authentication. This is great, right? And it saves it. So every time I run this, it's just going to save that list, and then I can come back to that later. We can generate stories, right? Again, this kind of building the context and capturing the essence of the process is a really interesting approach where I'm just going to use Disney as the example here. It's going to just take that information. So, there's a lot of things that we're doing here where we are, just asking the LLM to give us some answers, but it's doing it in a more structured and guided way. I think that's the magic of Innovation Studio, is the ability for it to really kind of create these prompts in very quick ways, right? It gives me just some basic information that I provide it, but then it's using all the other information around it, like the process, the company, the geography, the situation, all these things. And so here's our story. And then lastly, we'll go and maybe generate an image that represents that story. So I'm going to use Stable Diffusion in this case, but you can get some different prompts here, but I can also ask it to give it to me in the form of airline instructions or in the form of IKEA instructions, right? So you can make it fun and whimsical, but it can also be very specific to something that you're trying to capture within the organization as well. So yeah, there's my payment approval process in the theme of Disney. So take that for what you will, but we can try DALL-E too, just to see what happens. So once that comes back, the last thing I'm going to talk about here is that prospecting ability, right? So the ability to create content from all this information and to do that in a summarized email, right? And that could be for internal use, right? I'm trying to summarize this for my boss or my executive. This could be for sales, right? Where I'm trying to get some kind of prospecting email campaign going. So there's my payment approval process from DALL-E. So if I come back to my opportunities, let's imagine that I want to reach out for the automated payment verification using RPA to the CFO. How can I do that? So you can see all the information. So that automatically pulled all that information over, including the prospect details, including the information down here, and it's going to generate an email for me based on that, or it should. Do that. The big magic here is that we are forcing the large language model to return JSON, structured content JSON, which it looks like it's not cooperating right now, but it would create my marketing email coming back into this. So I can show you what one of those looks like. Let's go over here. I'm just going to use automated claims. So this message was completely built by the LLM just based on a description of a claims process. So you get the idea, but we are early access, so please be patient if you run into any little glitches like that, but we are making that even better as we go. And so I think there's a lot of potential here. We're super excited about it, but I think we're wanting to get feedback at this point. And so please sign up for the early access. So with that, I'm going to stop, or I'll actually come back to the slides. And we're going to open it up for questions. So again, innovationstudio.ai, sign up for early access. And with that, let's go ahead and go to the Q&A. I don't see any questions. I do see a few in the chat. All right. All right, so question 1, regarding the feature 3 of 7, what basic info do you need to have the AI make a decision? So let's jump back to features. So automated process enhancement. So you saw in the demo, I didn't need a lot, right? I provided the capabilities, I provided the process, the description. It's building a summary behind the scenes of the process. And so it really doesn't require a whole lot of upfront work, but you can tune it as much as you want. So the more information you give it, right? The company revenue, the number of employees, where is this located? Is it international, right? All those things are going to factor into that decision, and it's just going to build a comprehensive prompt. And so definitely the more information we can provide, the better. Yeah, and so question 2, can you build a future state blueprint? 100%. That is the goal here, is that we can take those opportunities. I have my current state process. Tell me what, if I did implement this improvement, what would the future state look like? And so that is where we're going. It's not quite there yet, but that is absolutely part of the roadmap and where we're going with that. The link for Innovation Studio, that is going to be innovationstudio.ai. So that's whether you're IBM or outside of IBM, it's the same for now. We are considering different options of how we would roll this out into production. It's possible that we would request that you sign up for your own Watsonx AI account and have it point to that. And what that does is also allows you to have your own LLM that you can tune, so that you're not dependent on this this more generalized one that we've created. And then reverse and solve for a process gap issue, 100%. That's definitely what we're seeing some of these abilities already doing, but I think the more feedback we get of some of the enhancements that might be interesting, that is absolutely something we want to see. Let's see. There was a question, does the AI initiate approvals of the process when everything is done? Not yet, but we do have other functionality that sits inside of our Blueworks Insights tool that we're enhancing there for workflow approval and governance. And I can imagine that all of these things are going to play a role where once we import that process into Blueworks, we would want to have some kind of automated process that follows an approval, review, iteration, right? Because it's not going to be perfect. We still need our business analysts to go in and make sure that the model is accurate. I did want to mention that the other plan is to not only build the model, the BPMN, but to actually include the metadata with that model, right? At least as an initial pass. And the APIs that Swapnil mentioned are what facilitates that, right? That we couldn't do that without that. So passing in not only what the process looks like and what the step names are and who the swim lanes are, but also on average, how long does it take? What are the inputs? What are the outputs? What are some potential problems, right? All of that information can be done with the Gen AI, and again, with a grain of salt, right? We need to validate, we need to ensure that those are accurate, but it's so much easier to start there, especially if we're trying to, map out process for a given stakeholder or department, instead of going in with a blank slate and saying, okay, where should we, what's the first step? We say, here are all the processes we came up with. Do these look right, right? And they won't, and then you'll iterate on that, but it's much easier to change what's already there as opposed to trying to build something from the ground up.
And Jared, just to add to that, once you take in these processes that you've built in Innovation Studio, there's that button that says Add to Blueworks Live. And Blueworks Live has these governance processes. We're actually enhancing that in the upcoming release at the end of next month as well, where you'll be able to get automatic approvals before you publish any process. So I can imagine Innovation Studio is being used more to generate different drafts of processes. Once you bring them into Blueworks Live, you can actually connect them to what's in Blueworks Live, so your existing processes, your existing participants, all of the existing metadata that you have in order to standardize everything, like I mentioned, for Blueworks Live. And once you're ready to publish that, then we allow you to run through approvals so the right stakeholders are involved before you take anything that's generated by AI and actually make it available within your organization.
Excellent. Yes, very excited to see that coming from the Blueworks Live team. So thanks for mentioning that. All right. So there was one question on pricing. Pricing right now is free. The early access is, the price is give us feedback, give us ideas, give us, what's working, what's not. Long-term pricing is still an unknown. We're looking at different options. Our mentality at Salient is that we want to drive additional IBM enhancements and our services. And so if this can drive, us to work together as, as an organization, then it may still be free. Don't quote me on that, but that's kind of where we're going with this, is that this would just be an enabler for your AI and process improvement strategy, and it would come along with any kind of Salient services provided. And so hopefully we'll have some more information on that, but it's really dependent on some of the feedback and understanding that we get. And it may just be that you pay for your prompt lab, right? Your Watsonx AI environment, which could be pennies a month, right? It's based on the tokens, and the tokens, or the LLMs that we're using, the Llama 3 model. The 3B is, I think, 60 cents per million tokens, and so you could create 100 processes and probably spend just a few pennies for that. So stay tuned on more information there, and we will be very transparent whether or not there will be a cost associated with this. But for now, it's more just give us feedback on what you think we could do with this in addition to what's already there. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you very much for joining. If you do run into issues, or if you have questions, reach out to Swapnil, reach out to Bob, reach out to myself. We're excited to be launching this. We're going to be definitely showcasing this next week while we're in Boston at the IBM Think conference, and exciting to see this partnership between IBM and Salient continue and grow with all these different technologies that we can start to embed into that. So with that, I'm going to close the webinar. Thank you for joining, and stay tuned for our next webinar, which is going to be, I think, 3 weeks from today. The topic is going to be around the Blueworks Insights functionality. That is our Blueworks Live add-on that sits on top of Blueworks and utilizes all of those valuable APIs that Swapnil went through. Thanks, everyone. Have a great week.